Back then, we thought it was another dumb summer ritual, something to giggle about the next morning, something we'd forget when school started. But I can't forget. Not anymore. Because it's not just a story, it's a debt. And sooner or later, everyone who plays has to pay. So if you've ever been to camp, if you've ever sat in the dark with friends and someone whispered about a game with rules too strange to be real, don't finish the story. Don't ask the rules. And for God's sake, don't play it. Because I did. And this is the last chance I have to tell you what really happened. The summer camp. I still remember the smell of that place before everything went wrong. Pine needles baked in the sun, the sharp bite of bug spray, the faint smoke that clung to our clothes after nights by the fire. Back then, camp was just camp. A few weeks of escape from parents' chores and the suffocating boredom of small-town summers. There were cabins lined up like crooked teeth, paint peeling from the wood, bunk beds that creaked like they were about to collapse, and counselors who were barely older than us but carried themselves like war generals. It was the kind of place where you didn't worry about cell signal because you never had it anyway. Where the loudest sounds at night were crickets, frogs, and your friends trying not to laugh during lights out. We were kids then, normal kids, stupid, fearless, invincible. I had my little circle, Ben, the loudmouth who thought every girl liked him, Mark, who carried horror paperbacks in his duffel and swore he'd seen a ghost once, and Claire, sharper than the rest of us, the one who always rolled her eyes when we got carried away. We weren't special, just a group of awkward teens tossed into the same cabin and bonded by mosquito bites and midnight dares. I guess that's what makes it so cruel. Horror doesn't pick out the chosen ones. It doesn't care if you're good or bad, smart or stupid. It just waits. The counselors told us about traditions from the very first night. Ghost stories at the fire, scavenger hunts, songs no one remembered the words to but sang anyway. That's where the whispers started. Some of the older kids mentioned a game. They wouldn't explain it outright, they just smirked, saying, "Wait till you're brave enough." It sounded like the usual camp nonsense. Some kids swore they'd played it before, but when we pressed for details, they changed the subject. I remember one counselor, Mr. Harris, the quiet one, snapping at a group of us when we asked about it. "Don't be idiots. It's just a story," he said, too quickly, too sharp. And then he walked off, stiff as if he'd said more than he meant to. That was the first time I felt it. Not fear, exactly, but a pull. The kind of curiosity that digs its claws in and doesn't let go. The days at camp blurred together in that golden, mosquito-filled haze, swimming in the lake until our skin puckered, roasting marshmallows too long until they burst into flames, carving initials into tree trunks. The nights were when things slowed down, when you started to hear the woods differently. Every snapping twig felt deliberate. Every shadow seemed longer than it should be. That's when the game always came up again. Whispers, half-jokes, a chant spoken, just loud enough for the words to stick, but too soft to make out clearly. I can't tell you how many times I brushed it off as nothing, but then I'd catch Claire staring into the dark, her lips pressed tight like she knew something the rest of us didn't. Looking back, I think she did. The game was always framed like a dare, like the ultimate test of who was the bravest. That's what made it so dangerous. Kids will do anything if you call them a coward first. And we were no different. Ben bragged he'd play it blindfolded if he had to. Mark carried a notebook where he scribbled rules. People had muttered under their breath. Claire refused to talk about it, which only made us more determined. We didn't know what we were walking into. We thought it was just another tradition like singing songs out of tune, or sneaking candy into cabins. Nobody told us that the game was older than the camp itself, that it wasn't invented by kids, but passed down like a curse. If I had walked away then, if I had ignored the whispers and the smirks and the way Mr. Harris's voice shook when he warned us off, maybe none of this would have happened. Maybe I wouldn't be here now, spilling this to you like it makes a difference. But that's the problem with camp. You live in this bubble where normal rules don't matter. You're tired, wired, stuck in the woods with nothing but your friends and the dark pressing in. And when someone dares you to play the game, you play it. Back then, we just thought it was harmless fun. Another dumb story we'd forget when school started. Another joke we'd laugh about later. We had no idea that by saying yes, we'd already stepped into something we could never step out of again. The first time we played, it happened on the fourth night of camp. The fire had burned low, glowing more orange than yellow, spitting sparks into the sky like tiny warnings. The counselors had retreated to their cabin, leaving us with a hiss of cicadas and the kind of daring silence that only exists when adults are gone. Ben started it, of course. He always did. He leaned forward, eyes flicking in the firelight, and whispered, "Let's play it." For a moment, no one answered. The words felt heavier than they should have, like the air itself tensed. Then Mark grinned, too eager, and said, "Hell yeah." I remember Claire shaking her head immediately. She hugged her knees to her chest and muttered, "Don't be stupid." But that was all it took. The rules, as far as we understood, were simple. At least they sounded simple. You made a circle. You each had to say the chant. You kept your eyes closed until the silence ended. And no matter what you heard, no matter what brushed against you, no matter what whispered your name you didn't answer, that was it. Just a game. We dragged logs into a circle, shoulders brushing, and Mark recited the chant he'd scribbled into his notebook from the older kids. I won't write it here. You think you want to know, but trust me, you don't. Even hearing it once was enough to lodge it in my brain like a splinter. We spoke the words together, low and nervous, pretending to laugh. At first, it was fine. Just the fire crackling, our own shaky voices overlapping. Then came the silence. I've never heard silence like that since. The crickets stopped. The wind stilled. Even the fire seemed to hold its breath. It was the kind of silence that makes you realize how loud the world usually is. Something moved outside the circle. At first it sounded like a branch snapping underfoot, but heavier, closer. I kept my eyes shut tight, because that was the rule. I could feel Claire trembling next to me, could hear Ben muttering under his breath, "It's just a joke, it's just a joke." Then it whispered my name, not in a spooky Halloween voice, not in a growl. In my mother's voice, soft, familiar, calling me the way. She did when dinner was ready. I nearly answered. My lips parted, the word balanced on my tongue. But Claire's nails dug into my arm so hard I nearly yelped. She saved me that night. The whisper moved on. It called for Ben, then Mark, always in voices we trusted, parents, siblings, people we missed. It knew, somehow it knew. We sat in that circle for what felt like hours, but must have been minutes. When the fire popped suddenly, breaking the silence, we all gasped and opened our eyes at once. Nothing was there. The woods looked the same. The fire burned as if nothing had changed. But we knew. Each of us knew we hadn't just played a game. Something had listened. Something had walked among us in that silence. We tried to laugh it off. Ben said it was creepy as hell, but still a joke. Mark wanted to write down everything he'd heard. Claire refused to speak at all. She just stared into the woods, pale as the moon. And when I asked her what was wrong, she whispered we weren't alone. That was the first time. And it should have been the last. We promised each other, then swore, in fact, that we'd never play it again, that it wasn't worth the risk, even if it was just a prank or a trick of the mind. But promises don't mean much when time dulls fear, because years later, when we went back, someone decided we should break that promise, and that's when the game truly began. I wish I could say we kept that promise forever, that we all left camp, grew up, and never looked back. For a while, that's what it felt like we did. Summer ended, school started, and life moved on in that way it always does, dragging you forward whether you want it to or not. But the thing about camp is, it sticks with you. Not in the way holidays or birthdays do, but in the way scars do. Every now and then, someone in our old group would bring it up, just a passing reference. They'd laugh about that stupid game we swore off. But the laughter always ended too quickly. We'd all go quiet, staring at the floor or changing the subject. Years went by, college, first jobs, failed relationships, adult life. But the bond we had from those weeks in the woods didn't dissolve completely. Every once in a while, one of us would send a late-night message or drop a photo from the old camp on a group chat. None of us admitted we still checked. It was Ben, of course, who suggested the reunion. He always was the ringleader, the daredevil, the one who wanted to turn nostalgia into a drinking game. One last time, he wrote in the chat, for old time's sake. Campfire, marshmallows, the works. I almost ignored it. I should have. But something in me, maybe loneliness, maybe guilt, maybe curiosity that never really died, typed back, I'm in. Claire resisted at first. I could see her typing and deleting, the little dots on the screen flashing and vanishing. Finally, she sent, bad idea. But a week later, she agreed. Even Mark, who'd moved halfway across the country, booked a flight. It was like some invisible thread tugged us all back, as if the woods hadn't finished with us yet. We met in early autumn, when the air was just starting to bite, and the leaves turned gold and red. The camp itself had closed down years before funding issues. They said, though we all knew better. The cabin stood empty, slouched, and rotting. Windows were shattered. The lake was overgrown with algae. The fire pit was nothing but a ring of stones buried in weeds. Still, standing there together again felt wrong and right at the same time. Wrong because every instinct screamed at me to leave. Right because the four of us, side by side, were suddenly 15 again, daring each other to do something stupid. Ben was exactly as I remembered, loud, charming, reckless. He brought beer and a speaker blasting old songs. Mark had grown quieter, more serious, though his eyes still lit up when he talked about the stories he was writing. And Claire hadn't changed much at all. She stood apart, arms folded, watching the woods like they were watching her back. The first night was almost normal. We built a fire. We roasted hot dogs. We told stories, laughed too loud, drank too much. For a few hours it felt safe, like the game had been nothing more than a weird memory, an exaggeration of scared kids' imaginations. But then Ben brought it up. He waited until the fire burned low, until we were all leaning back against the logs, half drunk and warm. Then he smirked and said, "So, anyone remember the camp game?" The silence that followed was the same as all those years ago. Not just awkward, heavy, like the woods leaned in closer to hear our answer. I told him to shut up. Mark laughed nervously. Claire said nothing, but Ben wouldn't let it drop. He pulled out a notebook, Mark's old one, somehow salvaged from storage, and waved it like a prop. "Come on, we're not kids anymore. We can handle it." Claire finally spoke, her voice sharp. You don't understand." But he just grinned and said, "Then explain it to me. Explain why you're still scared of a dumb chant." That was the moment, the pivot. Looking back, I know we could have left. We could have packed up and walked away, left Ben sitting by the fire with his bravado. But none of us moved. That's how it happens. You think you're in control. You think you're choosing to stay. The truth is, the choice was made for us the moment we came back. We didn't realize it yet, but by agreeing to the reunion, by setting foot in those woods again, we'd already started the second round. And this time, the game wasn't going to let us walk away. The second game, I should have stopped him. I replay that night in my head 1,000 different ways. Me grabbing the notebook from Ben's hands. Me walking away. Me convincing the others to leave before it started. But the truth is, I didn't. None of us did. Ben was already in the center of the firelight, flipping through Mark's old scribbles like it was a party trick. His grin widened when he found the page, the words we should have burned years ago. Mark tried to laugh it off, though his voice shook. It's incomplete. Half the rules are just rumors anyway. But Ben didn't care. He wanted the thrill. And maybe deep down the rest of us did too. Nostalgia mixed with dread, like standing on the edge of a cliff and wondering what it would feel like to jump. We made the circle again. Not logs this time, stones arranged hastily in the dirt. Four of us older, heavier, less sure of ourselves, sitting cross-legged around a fire that hissed and popped as if it knew what was coming. Ben led the chant. The same words, the same cadence. Except this time, I noticed something I hadn't before. A subtle hum beneath our voices, like the woods themselves were answering. The silence fell again, that terrible silence that pressed into your ears until your own pulse felt deafening. I clenched my fists, eyes shut tight. I told myself it was just like before, that we'd sit through it, endure the whispers, and open our eyes to nothing but empty trees. But this time, it didn't wait. The first whisper came almost instantly. My name, but not in my mother's voice, not in anyone's I recognized. It was distorted, dragging, like a recording played backward. Claire's breathing quickened beside me. Ben chuckled under his breath, but it sounded forced. Then it moved. I could hear it circling us, soft steps pressing into soil, twigs snapping under deliberate weight. Whatever it wasn't trying to hide. The rules echoed in my head. Don't open your eyes. Don't speak. Don't break the circle. But Ben, he never followed rules. When the whisper called his name clear this time, in his father's voice he laughed, muttered, "Nice try," and cracked one eye open. That was the moment everything shattered. The fire flared, roaring high, as if drenched in gasoline. Claire screamed. Mark cursed. I squeezed my eyes shut tighter, but I knew he'd broken it. Ben gasped. Not a laugh, not a shout, just a sharp, cut-off sound, like someone being yanked underwater. Then silence. When I finally dared to peek, Ben was gone. Not wandered off, gone. Not pulled a prank, gone. His spot in the circle was empty, dirt still indented where he'd been sitting. The firelight flickered across 3 faces instead of 4. Mark scrambled up, shouting his name, but the circle was already broken. The rules meant nothing now. The air around us shifted cold, heavy, wrong. And then we heard it. Not whispers this time. Laughter, low, guttural, too close. From the tree line, from the shadows, from everywhere at once. Claire grabbed my arm, nails biting deep. Her voice cracked as she said, "We need to go. Now." We stumbled through the woods, tripping over roots and rocks, calling Ben's name even though we knew it was pointless. The darkness pressed closer with every step. The path back to camp twisted, unfamiliar, as if the woods had rearranged themselves just to keep us lost. Every few seconds, I swore, I heard footsteps behind us. Not one set many, and always, always that laughter. We finally broke out into the clearing where the cabin stood, abandoned and sagging. For a moment, relief washed through me. But then Mark stopped dead, pointing at the ground. There were footprints, Ben's shoes, clear as day in the dirt. They led straight to the old fire pit. And then they stopped. No return, no trail, just vanished. That was the moment the weight of it settled in. This wasn't a game. Not anymore. Maybe it never had been. We gathered in the largest cabin, barricading the door with broken bunks and moldy chairs. None of us spoke for a long time. The only sound was Claire's quiet sobbing. Finally, Mark whispered he broke the rule. I wanted to argue, to say we'd find him, but the truth was carved into the silence between us. We all knew what the rules meant now, and we all knew Ben hadn't just disappeared. He'd been taken, and the worst part, the game wasn't finished. We didn't sleep that night, not really. We sat huddled in that rotting cabin, backs pressed against splintered wood, listening. The woods outside were alive in a way that had nothing to do with nature. The crickets and owls were gone. Instead, there were other sounds. Low rustling, wet dragging, the crunch of leaves beneath too many feet. Every time the wind rattled the broken shutters, Claire flinched like a gunshot had gone off. Mark kept scribbling in his notebook by flashlight, as if writing it down would somehow protect us. I just sat there, staring at the gap beneath the door, terrified I'd see some hand, some shadow reach under. Morning came, but it wasn't relief. The light was weak, gray, as if the sun itself didn't dare shine too bright on that place. When we finally forced ourselves outside, everything looked the same as it had the night before. The cabins, the lake, the empty fire pit. Almost normal. That was the worst part, how ordinary it all seemed, except for the absence of Ben. We searched for him anyway. Of course we did. We tore through the woods, shouting his name until our throats bled. We found nothing. No footprints this time. No trail. Just silence swallowing our calls. By noon, we gave up. Not because we wanted to, but because we knew. The game had him, and it wasn't about to give him back. That's when the fights started. Mark was furious. He shoved me, shouting, "Why didn't you stop him? You knew the rules." Claire snapped back. "You think yelling at him would have changed anything?" Ben never listened, he never listened. I stood between them, my voice breaking. "Do you hear yourselves? He's gone, and we're next if we don't figure this out." That shut them up, but it didn't bring any comfort. We decided to leave. Pack up, drive away, pretend we'd never come. But when we hiked back to where we'd left the cars, the dirt road was gone. Not overgrown, not blocked, gone. The path ended abruptly at a wall of trees, as if the forest had closed its jaws around us overnight. Claire fell to her knees, sobbing. Mark muttered to himself, flipping pages of his notebook, trying to map a way out. I just stood there, numb, because deep down I already knew the game wasn't going to let us leave. That night, the second one without Ben, we built another fire out of fear more than comfort. We needed light, needed the illusion of safety. Claire refused to sit close. She stood at the edge of the firelight, staring into the trees like she was expecting something to step out at any moment. It didn't make us wait long. First came the smell, sweet, rotting, cloying like spoiled meat. Then the voices. Not whispers this time, but full conversations. Familiar voices, overlapping, laughing, calling to us from the darkness. Ben's voice among them. Claire broke then. She clamped her hands over her ears and screamed, "That's not him. That's not him." But the forest didn't care. The voices grew louder, closer, circling the fire. I couldn't take it. I shouted into the dark, "What do you want?" The laughter stopped. The silence that followed was worse than the noise. And then, clear as if someone stood right behind me, a voice whispered, "Another round." The fire popped violently, sparks shooting into the air. Mark dropped his notebook, pages scattering into the dirt. Claire grabbed my arm, whispering through tears, "It's not finished. It won't stop until..." She couldn't finish the sentence. She didn't need to. The realization hit me like ice water. The game wasn't just something we played. It was something we started, and now it wanted us to finish it. That night, I didn't close my eyes once. Every time the flames flickered low, I imagined what might step into the light if it went out completely. By morning, we weren't talking about leaving anymore. We were talking about surviving, and survival meant playing by its rules whether we wanted to or not. The last night. By the third night, the woods had stopped pretending. There was no normal anymore, no illusion of an abandoned camp that we could rationalize away. The trees leaned closer, gnarled branches tangling together like ribs of a cage. The air itself was thicker, damp, buzzing faintly with a static that crawled under the skin. And the voices never stopped. They whispered through the day, now mocking, calling, taunting. Ben's voice threaded through them all, sometimes begging, sometimes laughing. Once, I swore I heard him scream my name, sharp and panicked, like he was right behind me. When I spun around, there was only the woods. Mark looked the worst. His notebook was gone, snatched by the fire, or maybe by the thing that moved in it, but his hand still twitched like he was writing, scribbling invisible words on his thigh. Claire was quieter than ever, though her silence was heavy, deliberate, like she was bracing for something she already knew was coming. And me? I'd stopped pretending I was the strong one. I was just as broken, just as terrified. But I was also listening, watching, trying to understand the rules. Because one thing had become clear. If we didn't play again, it wouldn't let us live to see another dawn. It started the moment the sun went down. The fire wouldn't light. Matches snapped, lighters sputtered. The wood we gathered stayed damp, no matter how dry it looked. That was when the laughter began deeper this time, resonant, as though the entire forest was laughing at us. Then the circle appeared. I don't mean we drew it. I mean it formed itself. Stones dragging across the dirt, scraping into place one by one, completing a perfect ring around us. When the last rock fell, the whispers hushed, replaced by a single, unified voice that seemed to rise from the ground itself. One more round. Claire broke first. She shook her head violently, tears streaking her face. No, we don't play. We don't feed it. That's what it wants. But Mark looked almost relieved. His voice cracked as he whispered, "If we don't, it'll kill us anyway." And me, I hated myself for what I said next, but the words came out before I could stop them. Then we play. But this time we finish it. We sat in the circle again. Just three of us now. The empty space where Ben should have been burning like a wound. The stones glowed faintly, pulsing like a heartbeat. Mark started the chant this time. His voice shook, but the cadence was steady, like he'd been practicing in his head all along. Claire resisted, lips pressed shut, until the voice hissed her name from the dark. Then she joined, broken, trembling. I followed last, and as the words left my mouth, I realized something chilling. The chant was no longer in our voices alone. Something else was speaking with us, through us. The forest responded instantly. A wind howled through the trees, though not a single branch moved. Shadows lengthened, reaching toward us like claws. And then the laughter returned, no longer distant, but all around, inside the circle, vibrating through the earth beneath us. I kept my eyes shut, nails digging into my palms, repeating the rules in my head. Don't open your eyes. Don't speak. Don't break the circle. But Claire couldn't take it. The whispers had turned cruel, mimicking her mother's voice, her father's people she'd lost. She sobbed, choking out, "Stop. Please stop," and clamped her hands over her ears. The moment she spoke out of turn, the circle shifted. The stones rattled, grinding deeper into the earth. A sound tore through the clearing, wet, tearing, like meat ripped from bone. Claire screamed once, and then silence. When I dared to open my eyes, her spot was empty. Mark's face was pale in the firelight, or whatever light was glowing from the circle now. His eyes were wide, wild, and I knew he wanted to run. I wanted to too, but the rules held us like chains. Two left. The laughter deepened, warping into something almost pleased. And then Ben's voice cut through, clear and desperate. Don't stop. Finish it, or you'll end up here too. My chest tightened. For a second, I thought I saw him, his outline in the trees. Gaunt and stretched, eyes wide and hollow. His mouth opened too wide, too wrong. And the voice that came out wasn't his anymore. Another round. Mark snapped. He'd bolted upright, stumbling over the stones, breaking the circle completely. His scream echoed as the shadows swallowed him whole, his flashlight tumbling into the dirt where he'd stood. And then there was one, me. The circle pulsed brighter, faster, like a heartbeat racing toward collapse. The voice thundered, "Finish IT." I don't remember making the choice. My lips just kept moving, finishing the chant, even as my throat tore raw. The ground shook. The air froze. And then, nothing. Silence. The glow faded. The stones lay still. The woods were just woods again. But the circle was complete, and I was alone. If you've made it this far, if you're still listening, then you already know more than you should. I shouldn't be telling you any of this, but what choice do I have? The game doesn't end when you leave the circle. It doesn't end when everyone else is gone. It ends when you talk about it. That's why I'm here writing this down, recording it, whatever form you're hearing it in. This isn't a story. It's a confession. It's the only way I can maybe shift the weight off me, even if it means placing it on you. I haven't left the camp. I can't. Every time I try, the road folds back into trees. The lake loops into itself. The cabins stand waiting like vultures on broken stilts. It doesn't matter how far I walk. I always end up back at the fire pit. The circle is still there, waiting, and the voices haven't stopped. They're quieter now, not the shrieking laughter or the distorted screams, softer, patient. They whisper my name in the dark, coaxing, promising. Sometimes it's Ben, sometimes it's Claire. Sometimes it's my own voice telling me things I don't want to hear. The worst part? It's working. I feel myself leaning toward them more each night. My body feels weaker. My thoughts blur at the edges. The circle isn't outside me anymore, it's inside. A mark I can't wash off. I've tried everything. Staying awake until my vision swims. Covering my ears until blood trickles from the pressure. At one point, I even smashed my flashlight, hoping the dark would make it stop. But the dark isn't empty. It never is. So I write. I speak. I confess. And I tell myself maybe if someone else knows, maybe if someone else believes, it'll pass to them and leave me free. That's what the rules don't say. What no one writes down, the game feeds on attention, on curiosity, on the dare. And now you know the rules. That was the one mistake we made. Back when we were kids, we thought it was just a campfire story. Just words passed around to scare each other before bed. but words are invitations. And once you hear them, once you repeat them, you've already stepped into the circle. So here's the part where I warn you. Stop. Turn this off. Forget you ever heard me. Don't go looking for the chant. Don't go searching for the old cabins. Don't even whisper the words to yourself. Because the moment you do, the moment you play, you'll feel it too. That silence, that cold, that weight pressing in around you until your heartbeat is the only sound left. And then you'll hear them. Don't say I didn't warn you, but I know you won't stop. That's the curse of it, isn't it? The curiosity. You want to know what happened to Ben, to Claire, to Mark. You want to know why I'm still here, still breathing when they're gone. You want to know what the last round really means. So fine, I'll give you one last secret. One last gift before the circle swallows me too. The game doesn't take everyone. It leaves one behind. To tell the story, to spread it, to keep it alive. That's me this time. But next time, it might be you. And when it is, when you're sitting in that circle and you hear your name whispered from the dark, don't open your eyes. Don't break the circle. Don't laugh, don't cry, don't speak. Because if you do, they'll know you're ready, and they never stop playing. So now you know why we should never have played the camp game again. Why I wish more than anything that I could go back to that night, back to when it was just a stupid dare around a fire, and say no. But I didn't, and here I am, still trapped in a story that won't end, still listening to the whispers waiting for me to slip. The truth is, it's already too late for me, but maybe not for you. You have a choice right now. Close this. Forget it. Pretend you never heard the chant, never learned the rules. Maybe the circle won't notice you. Maybe it'll skip you this time, or lean in closer. Keep listening. Comment below what you think happened to Ben, or why the game keeps coming back. Share this with someone who swears they'd never be scared by a campfire story. Watch how long they last before they start hearing whispers in the dark. That's the curse it feeds on attention, on curiosity, on you. So don't just lurk. Tell me what you think. Leave your theories. Have you heard of the game before? Did anyone in your town play something like it? The more you talk about it, the more it grows. And remember, stories like this, they never stay stories. If you think you're safe just because you're sitting in the light right now, watching on a screen, you're not. The circle is already around you. The only question left is, will you play?